I want to welcome everybody. I'm Jill Shimoleski. You know, I'm here with Phyllis Bronson and Carol Petersen, and this is really a follow-up Q&A to our last webinar last month on missing the mark on progesterone, what most menopause providers don't know. We had so many, we went over. So Carol, you had to leave to go to Boston, I
Mhm.
think.
Yes,
And
that's right.
so we let you go. And then Phyllis and I stayed on for another, I think, almost half an hour. And we still had a lot of questions in the chat. And so I took those questions. So we are going to start with those questions first because those are the ones that were submitted last time. And then we'll see where we're at with time. If you guys have live questions, the Q&A should be, or the chat section should have accessibility where you guys can put questions in there, things like that. So I would say if you have questions, put them in the chat. But we will start with the questions we have here first. And I'm just curious, just we're recording. So if you have to leave, don't worry. We will send out the replay and this will be made public. So you'll be able to share it with your people, your physicians, your nurse practitioners, anyone and everyone who is interested in learning more about progesterone. So welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I'm always so grateful that you take your time to be with us.
Well, we love doing it, and we're happy to do it periodically when there are ample questions. We love having you hosting, Jill, and bringing all.
Yes, you're a wonderful host
Yeah.
Oh, thank
and
you.
social media guru too. My
Well,
goodness.
am I? I've been at it a long time. I look back and I'm like, that was from 2017. So I think I've been doing social media for about 8 years. It's taken me a long time to find my groove, but I'm doing okay on social media. It's
Yeah.
not my favorite thing, but we have to get the word out. And I think that it helps me to have that platform to even introduce you because I know, Carol, you're more on Facebook, I would say, than probably Instagram. And I know, Phyllis,
Mhm.
you're like trying to not necessarily always be on that, which I get, but it helps me to then introduce you to people because you guys know so much about progesterone and missing pieces that a lot of people are really, really interested in learning about. Oh, this is so cute. Hi, goats. Thanks for this. That will be now. You realize it's a compliment. So please make sure you
Okay.
take it as a compliment.
Well, I joked with Jill before we came on. I would say rather than goat, that we're slightly older goddesses.
I like that too.
Bringing,
Slightly older, yes. But sog doesn't sound quite
you
right,
know,
right? Or slog.
and
So,
bringing, our
Yeah.
passion is how do we bring the science alive where women live in our emotional, relational worlds.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's what's so missing in some of the energy out there today where people just want to hammer it down, this is it.
Yeah.
And I got this so focused on thinking they know everything about a discourse that some of the best doctors have been involved in for the last 40 years. And our
Yeah.
peers on the Institute of Bioidentical Medicine board, and we have hormone grand rounds almost every Wednesday. And we've been talking about this stuff for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, as a scientist, I revere that I stand on the shoulders of my scientific fathers, if you will, because they're
Yeah.
my fathers. They're older white men,
Yeah.
in my case. So
Yeah. Yeah.
they've really been important in my world.
Yeah. And we're standing on yours because you're really helping us to get deeper and deeper into hormones. So
And
we're
let's just introduce
grateful.
ourselves briefly. I'd like
Yeah.
to say a
Yeah.
few
Please do.
to me.
Yeah.
So, Carol, should I just jump in and then you can?
go ahead. Go ahead.
So, I've had a long and winding journey in science, and I'm really grateful that it hasn't been the straight and narrow path because I don't think I could have done the level of biochemistry I've done in Boston, where I came from. And I came from a big medical world back there. All my aunts and uncles are all doctors. My dad was a brilliant civil engineer who worked all over the world. And that's where I got my love of science and the mountains. So I'm a scientist and a ski bum. I like to just put it out there.
Yeah.
And I live up here in the mountains, but for years I spent a week a month at the University of Denver. And I worked with my first chemistry professor, who then years later became the head of my doctoral committee when I did the research at DU and finished between DU and the Union Institute. And I've been back in Boston at MIT. I did a lot of different things. but I have a very strong biochemical background, and I have a passion for the science, a passion for the molecules. And the molecules don't lie, they tell a story. And so what I just want to say at the beginning to all the women out there that are listening, you're all entitled to your own opinions about why you are the way you are, for example, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And so for scientists, we are in a time when science is being eroded by a lot of junk thinking, conspiracy thinking, and it's very important to keep coming back to the fundamental aspects in science don't change. There are certain things that are molecular, that are basic. Yes, the discourse expands, but the essential premises that make, the sun come up, that make gravity happen, these are things that people need to understand. And it's true in our field too. So
Yeah, well said. Yeah,
there you have
I love that.
that.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Okay, so I have a degree in pharmacy from the University of Wisconsin, and I even started graduate school. I was going to work with pharmaceutics, like what happens when a drug goes into your body. But fortunately, I left. But at the time, there was a professor, one of my favorites at the university, and his area of expertise was eyes and skin. And he actually was the person behind the development of Crinone, the topical vaginal progesterone. And it's in a special base that he too was involved in developing. It's Replens. You may see it over the counter as a lubricant moisturizer. And he was looking for something that would stay there longer in the vaginal tissue, stickier, so to speak. And then having progesterone in there makes it stickier, and you have more access to the progesterone in that dosage form. I remember him saying that the medicine of the future is always going to be about dosage forms. So it's really strange that ultimately I started working at Women's International Pharmacy, and it was like everything I had done in my whole life prepared me for this world. Strange, even from when my mother said in high school, take a typing course, you'll always get a job. So, but
Remember typing? Yeah.
but I got a strong background in chemistry and biochemistry. I took graduate level courses in the chemistry school. I worked in chem engineering with a professor who was developing gas chromatograph carrier things. So this whole science about that Phyllis brings too. I was involved with that. And so for the last more than 30 years, I devote a lot of time to looking at what's going on in the body. And we get stuck and locked into things we've been taught. And haven't you heard that about 50% of what you learn in med school is wrong by the time you get it? I think it's more. I think it's probably
Yeah.
more. And it's time. One of the things that really excites me about this time is that we have access, even more access to information. We have access to opportunities to use hormones that we never had in the whole lifespan of human existence. Well, maybe we need them more now too. Maybe that's a coming together as well. But what I see happening is, because of this, women are becoming, and look, they're here now. People are here now. They want to understand what's going on. And this puts the power back in their own hands. You have to make your own choices, find your teachers, find your information, and really trust your gut. That resonance, if something resonates with you, it's probably a good direction, even before you have the full mental facts. If you have a feeling that this is for you, then follow that. If you have a feeling it's not for you, then you know it isn't. Don't do it. So I love how much we are empowering women. And it's like conventional medicine has suddenly discovered that we have a new set of people to drug. They were like not paying too much attention to perimenopause, just sending women back home till they got worse, and then maybe start drugging them. Now they're interested in drugging you earlier. So we don't want to have that happen. We can intercede and really have a much better quality of life. And I so love the opportunity to be able to do this.
Oh, Carol, that was awesome. I so everything you said, I think it resonates with everybody here. I'm seeing some of the comments.
And
Um,
I'm just going to add one thing before we go forward. You know, I come from a big medical world, and most of my aunts and uncles were traditional physicians. And my aunt in Boston, who just died at 100, was one of the original internists from Tufts. So I learned a lot from that world. And I don't believe in taking a chainsaw to academia. And in medicine, it's very complicated because, of course, we disagree with certain things. However, it's complicated today enough for women, and so many of the younger women are overwhelmed about birth control and overwhelmed about what to do because they're terrified of getting pregnant in this political climate. And what are they going to do? And birth control is limited, but it doesn't mean that the methodologies that were developed for that particular discourse were done as an evil empire. They were, some of them were done with some good intention, even though we don't like the molecular discourse. And I think that, you know, there are shades of gray in all of this hormone inquiry. If we turn it into just, you know, a black and white discourse, we miss the essence of the paradox of medicine and of life. I mean, it's full of paradox. So I know great doctors in traditional medicine who are desperate to learn this stuff and are open to it and recognize that they don't know everything. And then I know other doctors, like that idiot we responded to yesterday, just claiming that, you know, there's no difference and, you know, in the hormones, whether they're synthetic or compound.
They must have failed their physiology biochemistry course.
You're right.
yeah, we have a lot to say about that letter or about that article, don't we?
Yeah. So I just, you know, I just want to say, I think it's full of paradox, and I think holding that is important because I read these things where somebody who has no science background will write an article just saying, oh, this form of birth control is evil and they're trying to kill us. And that's just not usually the intent.
Yeah.
Okay? It's just not. And, you know, listen, I like to call it arrogance 101, the first year of medical school. I mean, for the ones that are vulnerable to that way of being, yeah, they get sucked in pretty quickly. And we all know doctors who have remained in that. But we also know other kinds of doctors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's jump in.
Yeah, let's jump in. Okay, so we'll start with, I know my reading is getting worse and worse, so I have to wear my glasses. Okay, so question, are there any progesterone protocols related to transitioning a patient off an SSRI, so an antidepressant, even if her progesterone levels on Dutch look adequate?
Oh, well, let me start, Carol, okay?
Okay.
Let me start and then I'll hand it to Carol because this is right up my alley. I mean, my book is Moods, Emotions, and Hormones. What is it called? Moods, Emotions, and Aging, Hormones, and the Mind-Body Connection.
Yeah.
I usually have a copy handy. I don't. But
I know I have one too somewhere here.
Moods, Emotions, and Aging. So my work for 27 years has been the biochemical connection of hormones to mood. So this question, it's not so much about transitioning off. The hormones are vital as containers for mood. They're vital. That if you have balanced hormones, you're able to contain your moods. Does that mean you should cold turkey off an SSRI? No. You have to get the proper protocol for each drug from a pharmacist who knows how to do that, because there are different protocols, and it shouldn't be cold turkey for most. But once your hormones are balanced, and it's very safe to start working with your hormones while you're still on these drugs, For years, we've talked about this at Abram Hoffer's Institute, what is it, the International Society of Orthomolecular Medicine in Canada. For years, I was the only person talking on hormones. Year after year, I'd talk in Vancouver and Toronto, back and forth, and integrating how to help people get the nutritional support for mood issues. Abram Hoffer was the pioneer in niacin therapy for schizophrenia. And then we taught them how to use hormones in addition as a very central component. So there are no such protocols as such, but there's a wealth of information that we talk about all the time at our grand rounds about how to help women get more balance with hormones so they don't need those drugs. And there's a time and place. I mean, there are people who need those drugs or think they need those drugs. And there are people who really are afraid to get off them. And I agree with Carol, I think get the facts the best you can and then trust your intuition. Ultimately, the purpose of this work with hormones is to help women feel strong enough to trust their own inner knowing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The whole reason for turning to drugs like SSRIs, Ritalin, the benzos, they're underlying major hormone disturbances that haven't been identified and nutrient deficiencies too. And I have on my website, and this was from ISOM, as Phyllis was speaking about, James Greenblatt has a protocol for detoxifying from SSRIs, but he did not include hormones, which I think was a deficit. So you can see that lecture under resources on my website. I think it's also very valid. But my thought is to first identify and correct those hormone imbalances and nutritional imbalances, and then taper. One of my clients sent me a book title that she said her doctor was using, and I looked at it. I was going to buy it, but was disappointing to me, and this is what I've been hearing. They pick a drug and tell you how to taper. They don't tell you about make it easy. Put in those missing things that you turn to those drugs for. Even abuse of other drugs. I feel real sorry for people because they're self-medicating for a problem. And instead of identifying the problem that took them there in the first place, we're just trying to pull people off without any support except for maybe counseling, but it doesn't address the biochemistry.
Yeah. Yeah. It's bigger. It's again, and I think like Phyllis, you were saying this, what you were alluding to about the science and what we're saying, social media makes everything seem like it's like a 30-second, here's what you do. And it's just that there's so much more nuance. It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray. And I think it's a very holistic in this society of quick fixes. There's a process to all of this.
How about allowing the possibility that moods are part of the dance of life, certainly part of the dance of being a woman. And just because you're having feelings that you don't like, it doesn't mean there's not gold in there for you to learn from. And I think that's the beauty of certain discourses where you allow all the feelings and you watch them go by like watching the ocean, instead of getting hooked into this must be real because I'm feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
And often if you allow things to unfold, what you think is the truth about your emotional state is, emotions come and go.
Yeah, really well said. Okay, the next question is it true that oral progesterone more than 200 milligram causes breast inflammation? And this is somebody who pointed out Dr. David Zava's research about breast inflammation.
I think it's the opposite.
Yeah.
I think it's the
I agree.
opposite. And progesterone actually is anti-inflammatory, anti-proliferative, and has a significant impact on anti-inflammatory markers like interleukin beta. And it's very important to recognize that increasing progesterone usually reduces inflammation. I don't agree with David Zava on many things. I think he's a bright guy, and I think he also is somewhat misguided on women and hormones, and how to assess what works. We have seen the opposite. We have seen
There,
inflammation get reduced when women use straight progesterone rubbed into their breast. And David Brownstein, I think, said, put some iodine right into that cream, do it over the sink, Lugol's iodine. We have women who do that several times a week, and the breast tenderness is gone. Just take a few drops of Lugol's. It's
yeah,
compound iodine.
and lumps go away too. If you have any fibrocystic lumps, all disappears. There's no reason that any woman should have any breast pain, either in the menstrual cycle or in the perimenopausal years. There should be no fibrotic tissue if the hormones,
Right.
particularly progesterone, are used correctly. And iodine makes a difference too. So the two paired should really eliminate anybody's problems with that. And it should be known to everybody that they have that possibility. And pain relief is same day. You don't have to figure you have to tolerate this for your whole, say, your luteal phase, or you have to tolerate it for long periods of time during the perimenopausal years. No, usually the first day of using progesterone directly on your breasts will relieve it.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard the same. I've read the same. I feel like everything I've read is the opposite of this question. So I was great to hear that from both of you.
Later.
Here's a question. How do you test if you are getting enough progesterone? Is it saliva? And is there a certain ratio of progesterone to estrogen? I know you're going to love this question.
You want to go first or me?
I'll go.
Yeah.
Why would you take one test one day and say there's a ratio here that I have to obey? And I get really annoyed. And labs like to do this, or doctors like to do this. They're trying to make sense of chaos, which the lab testing can introduce. I have a wonderful list on my website of progesterone deficiency symptoms. And this was not created by me. It was a wonderful woman named Ray who's passed away. But she had issues with progesterone, did a lot of research on this. This list has about 125 symptoms of progesterone deficiency. Far better than a test is to go look at this, tick off what's bothering you, and make sure it's gone. Then you have enough progesterone. Can you use too much? I recently learned from a study done by a fertility clinic, so you can't use too much progesterone because we can't even get there. Third trimester women have like 200 nanograms per deciliter progesterone in the serum. And let's say luteal, abundant luteal would be 20, 30 nanograms per deciliter. But I learned from this study, they observed that the fetus concentrates progesterone 6 times that of the mom. And this is a sexually neutral hormone, obviously, because we have both sexes in utero. And so to me, you have to use enough progesterone to go beyond that, to start talking about toxicity. A lot of times I do see lists of people claiming too much progesterone, but I would look at that and I reinterpret that either as not enough progesterone, maybe some problems with the other hormones, with insulin, glucose, iodine not being addressed at the same time. I think these lists of progesterone too much are really false and give people a sense that there's an upper limit. And then we recently have these position papers by the Endocrine Society, Menopause Society, that you only need 200 milligrams of oral progesterone only to protect the uterus, and that's false too. It won't protect the uterus for some women, and they're forgetting that. But practitioners are now thinking 200 milligrams oral progesterone is the ceiling for progesterone therapy, and it couldn't be farther from the truth.
Okay.
And I think go ahead, Phyllis, because we had a question on that. Go ahead, and I'll find it.
Carol, should I jump in?
Yes, please.
That was brilliant. This is my research area. So I'm going to reiterate what I said at the Progesterone Part 2 seminar a few weeks ago. Let me jump into just a section where I talked about the research we were doing 27 years ago, looking at the molecular spectroscopy and the difference between synthetic progestins that were being given to all the women on estrogen versus real progesterone. So we did the FTIR, the Fourier transform infrared spectra. We could see the differences. And the same kind of doctors that are influencers out there today were saying, oh, there's no difference. Progestins, they're all funded by the same, resources. And the lead researcher looking at the study on rhesus monkeys was able to discern that medroxyprogesterone acetate is really not safe for the female cardiovascular system. So jump forward to the 27 years of work we've done, and you don't do original bench science as you get older. I did that. You if you've got something of great worth, which we do, you find ways to bring it into the world and to bring it alive. But it can't just be this blanket, well, every woman needs a certain amount of estrogen or her bones are going to crumble. No, that kind of approach to hormones negates the importance of looking at individual women and how they respond. So starting with that, what I said a few weeks ago for the first time out loud, and I brought it into this too, and we talked about it at Grand Rounds. When women are saying stupid things out there, including a bunch of newcomer doctors, that transdermal progesterone suppositories don't work because they can't get the 6 milligram serum value, it's insane to me as a scientist, as a biochemist, and I want this to be very clear. Really taking it in and bringing it into your world, telling your doctors, oh my gosh, this is why transdermal is so important. When you use a well-compounded, well-made transdermal cream or suppository, 80% of that molecule is immediately converted to the neurosteroids in the skin. It goes into the portal blood. It is immediately converted. There's no there to measure
Sure.
to get to your 6 milligrams. Is that the number, Carol? Something?
Yeah, so it's something like that. And that really is kind of low for luteal phase
Right. So they're
progesterone. So I don't think it works all the time.
they are looking at oral progesterone. And the difference, so when a woman swallows progesterone, the same liver, the same 5-alpha reductase base enzymes are converting that oral progesterone in the liver, right, in the gut, to the neurosteroids. The difference is when it's swallowed, it's a slower transition. It takes longer. Therefore, there's more exogenous progesterone left over available to be measured for their quantitative assessment, which is only accurate a little bit if you're looking at oral levels of how to protect the endometrium. If you use enough transdermal, and we're not giving anybody medical advice here today, you each need to take this back to your people, your practitioners, but we have seen over 27 years, the endometrium is protected just fine if women get enough. Form is personal preference. So I just want to be very clear on this point. Carol, I want you to say what you want to say, but I need to finish this because there's so much confusion around this, and because we've been in the trenches on this for years and really bringing this part forth recently. If you use transdermal, it's the best for mood because using enough, the enzymes will convert to allopregnanolone. That will then, in that form, open the chloride ionic channel, and that's where the neuroinhibition happens. It's converted through the enzymatic action, and then the chloride channel is open. It mimics a hydration sphere. I'm not going to give you a biochemistry class today. I'm kind of tempted. But the essence is that with transdermal, women get calm before they get sleepy. With oral, they get sleepy most of the time. It's great for insomnia. And I have No problem with women using it if they like that. But for our women who need a lot, they use what they need at night. Usually 200 to 600 milligrams is our average. 400 is kind of right in there. And then they use it, if they're having an anxious time, they use it throughout the day, but in smaller doses. So they use 50, 100, even 150. I find over 150 at a time can make women get tired. But if they space it out, we have women using it every hour when they're going through a divorce or some traumatic time. Why? Because they need it. David Rosensweet, the head of the Grand Rounds and head of the board, he has brought Carol and my work so much to the forefront. And what he says now is women should use enough progesterone until if they get to a point where they're waking up groggy, cut back. But it's when women use oral, it's not just that they're getting too much allopregnanolone. No, it's because in the upper GI, metabolites form from oral that do not happen with transdermal or suppositories so much. The upper GI metabolites that are abundant with oral are first cousin of phenobarbital. And so this chemical forms 5-alpha pregnanedione, and women, they get sleepy even in small quantities because it's a first cousin of a major sedative molecule.
I'd like to follow up on that if I might, Phyllis, if you're okay. So what we're talking about allopregnanolone, and some women express more of that than others, and that's where you get the grogginess. And so for all the years I've been doing this, we went to alternative dosage forms, smaller amounts at a time, like Phyllis just spoke about. It's very helpful. But I got to thinking, I thought, after all these years, why didn't I consider this? So they're down that pathway, they're making more aloe. What's the next step to move that aloe on? So you're not having persistent grogginess. And I looked and I found sulfation and glucuronidation is needed to metabolize allopregnanolone, this really potentially sedating molecule. And so now I am more alert to that and asking women to check. And some women have done their genetic profiles and they actually do see diminished activity in some of these detox pathways. So I think this opens the door. I consider like too much aloe, too much grogginess, a barrier to use enough progesterone to get full relief of progesterone. But understanding how to move that aloe on with detoxification, I think, is a really important piece. I think it's a huge breakthrough that I thought to look in this direction. So
that makes sense, Carol.
That's very good, Carol. It's very good. But I also want to stress that the overarching majority of women, I concur with the doctor who spoke brilliantly last year at the International Menopause Society, which is much better than the NAMS, what do they call them? The American.
It's a Menopause Society now. They dropped in North America.
Okay, the Menopause Society. They're better because they're not as pharma connected, but they're not perfect. But they have some very good lectures, and I'll sometimes get up at the crack of dawn and jump on. And a doctor last year said, for most women across the board, real progesterone is the most important molecule. And I thought that was great coming out of that seminar out of Europe. But I don't want anything to interfere with that overarching importance of progesterone. And so the fact is the conversion to allopregnanolone is very important. It is what creates the calmness. And there are many women who bathe in that calm for the first time in their lives. And I think it's very important to note the statistical relevance of the fact that so many women are getting healed when they get enough progesterone for the first time. I just want to put that context.
Yeah. Well, and that actually, that sort of says interesting because talking about progesterone, one of the questions is the next question, is it true that too much progesterone will downregulate estrogen receptors and cause symptoms of estrogen deficiency? Do you see that?
No.
When people go too high? Yeah.
No.
And they could just simply need estrogen. That
Mhm.
hasn't been identified, is my opinion on that. The other thing is, I think my progesterone is making more estrogen. This is this intensifying effect that progesterone has on estrogen. If you're expressing a lot of estrogen, that can be made worse with a little amount of progesterone, and you need a lot more to flip it. Unfortunately, this scares many women, and they stop.
Yeah.
And become convinced that they are intolerant to progesterone. They're not intolerant. They just simply haven't had enough for their needs. Their needs are massive.
And I will add to that sometimes the demand for estradiol is very significant and is not being met. And progesterone mediates E2. So it is anti-proliferative, it mediates E2. And so if you're not getting enough estrogen and you introduce a lot of progesterone, your estrogen deficiency symptoms are magnified. For example, the opposite of a classic migraine is a vascular constrictive headache. And many women get those premenstrually when they're younger, or when there are drops in estradiol when they're older. And also it's congruent with women who are sensitive to barometric pressure headaches. That drop in estradiol is similar. But let me just add to what Carol was saying, because with the mood variations in women, when women tell me they're allergic to progesterone, my first response is, you're not allergic to your own biology. Almost never. I mean, it can happen. Bill Ray, the former head of environmedicine, a brilliant guy, he taught me a lot. I lectured there for a couple of years. And he said anybody can be sensitive to anything at any time. But as a broader lens at women and hormone sensitivity, we need to look at the fact that you're not allergic to your own biology most of the time, unless you have a significant autoimmune problem. But what does happen, and women tell us, this small subgroup of women, and keep in mind, it is, no matter how loud you are a small subgroup. Because the overarching majority of women who have been helped by enough progesterone is astounding. But this small subgroup, I don't negate your feelings, and I don't negate that you have these weird responses. What I want women to be able to tolerate thinking about is that even though all your feelings are valid, they may not be grounded in a full context of what's really going on. Most of the women I've worked with over years who claim to be progesterone sensitive, and it's a small number, but they exist. They have an interesting history of what I would call neurochemical aberrations. Most of them have been on many medications, or certainly some, and certainly for a long time. Many of them have been extremely oriented to being too sensitive to their environment, if you will. They're extremely empathic, if they're kind. And some of them are really brutal when they don't feel agreed with. And I've seen it all. I've seen the vehement, you don't understand, Well, I do understand. I understand. Carol understands. David understands. We're all different. But I think to ignore the bigger context of how compromised so many women have been biochemically their entire lives, starting with a progesterone deficiency at age 13, is to ignore the truth about what's been going on for a long time for many. Not saying all, saying for many.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this is a question. This actually two people asked some very similar questions. So this is from a coach, a women's health coach. We see some women have an instant positive response to higher doses of progesterone. They say it's life-changing when they start it, and then after a couple of months, they start to feel like it's not working. Do we know why this happens or what we can do about it?
They need more.
They need more.
Yeah, you probably in the course of that, more progesterone receptors will start either behaving properly or actually an increase in number. And progesterone receptors can decrease in number. I think it was University of San Diego was working on endometrial cancer. And what they found was as the cancer got worse, progesterone receptors went down. And they were going to develop a test to tell you how bad your endometrial cancer was. But in the forward, in the discussion, they pointed to earlier research that 50% of endometrial cancer was reversible with progesterone.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
So in this time where you're using progesterone and working, you may be creating more receptors for it, so it can do more. There could be other interfering things. I'd hate to make a blanket statement on it. I would also look at what's the relationship with the other hormone systems. In this case, have you changed delivery systems, and do you have to adjust? Different delivery systems are going to give you different kinds of absorption, so that can be a clue too. So it's variable, and I think you need to look at what's the circumstances of the individual rather than say a blanket thing. And I just remember this morning, because I was thinking about that question, Jonathan Wright introduced this idea of progesterone cream fatigue on the skin. And he said to overcome it, use it vaginally. And everything was fine. So what does that mean? I'm not sure, but he saw enough of better absorption for those patients that he was working if they switched from cream to intravaginal, and suddenly it worked again.
But it points some direction, right? So if it's telling us something, right? If you have that initial positive response and now something's changed, it seems like there probably needs to be an adjustment somewhere, or
Yes.
looking at that big picture.
And
Yes.
switching modalities or including compounded suppositories, maybe trying oral at night and transdermal during the day. Geraldine Pryor, the pioneer up in British Columbia, has used oral at night for years. Our women generally prefer transdermal and suppositories, but we have some women who need oral at night to sleep. I think I want to come back to one thing you brought up earlier, Jill, which was the implication that progesterone interferes with estrogen neurochemistry. It is true that progesterone can downregulate certain aspects of estrogen chemistry. It is a buffer against certain aspects of estrogen. But what I object to in that kind of populist theory that's floating around out there is that if a woman needs more estrogen, give her more estrogen. And we have always worked with primary E2 as being the most important focus, and we always add estriol to our base formula. However, we have women who need more estradiol than the ratios that we used to adhere to. And we've been talking about this at Grand Rounds. We don't follow the 10-10-80 ratios any longer. We use enough estradiol to clear symptoms and not so much to induce breast glandular sensitivity.
Yeah.
Every woman is responsible for her own OBGYN care. We don't do that. So you need to have your proper follow-up with whatever you're doing. But you have to get enough estradiol to handle symptoms. The problem with some of these theories floating around is that women advocating them are not using estriol, which is a very important buffer, very important. And David Rosensweet and you did a video on this, or a webinar.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important. I think it's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. Yeah, I think it's on my website too, so I can share that. Yeah.
Great. And it's a very important molecule for anti-proliferation. And the same people advocating these higher estrogen amounts without using estriol, and even a day off of progesterone, is dangerous because you don't have the anti-proliferative effect. So I'm all for women getting enough estradiol, and certainly the neuroreceptors for estradiol love getting enough, if it's buffered by molecules that induce safety. And if you have a proper balance, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
We don't believe in fake periods. We don't believe in cycling a la Suzanne Summers. T.S. Wiley. That is not the way we approach this. I'm not saying everything was negative that they did, but I think it induced a certain kind of thinking that doesn't support the broader way that science would defend using hormones for women who are older. And when you say, well, it's natural to pretend to have a period, there's nothing natural about it. The purpose of a period is for women who are ovulating.
Mhm.
And for older women, getting their hormones in balance counters things that I don't consider natural, like dementia, like significant cognitive decline,
Yeah.
depression. These things are not natural. They happen as a function of aging and oxidative stress and free radical formation. The way you counter them is by getting enough hormones. As women age, their fat cells pump out more E1, a more aggressive estrogen, if you will, a more toxic estrogen. And the way you overcome that is by getting enough E2 to overcome that.
Mhm.
And the estrogen series goes from E1 to E2 to E3. It does not back react. And I can get into that more if we have time. But essentially, what you're looking at is these molecules that go from here to there. And there are biochemical reasons why it works that way.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think what some women are told is that, again, because fat cells make estrogen and it's primarily estrone, then we don't want to give them estradiol. And so what you're saying is that's actually not
That's the
true.
key. That's the
Right.
key.
Right.
When there's enough estradiol, it overtakes the estrone.
Yeah. 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 That's a great point,
Counters.
Phyllis. Yeah. There was a question about vaginal progesterone. We were talking about, you use suppositories. For someone, we hear this a lot, but the question is, I can't afford compounded vaginal progesterone. Is absorption a problem using the Prometrium capsules vaginally? We talked a little bit about this last time, but
Carol?
do you use them? Do
Yeah,
you find that?
I'll address that. It
Okay.
certainly can be used vaginally.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Women's International, we used to do colorless, dye-free capsules for intravaginal. And I just want to insert a thing about Prometrium I just learned because I was going to double check what the published side effects of Prometrium had on their official FDA documents. But strangely enough, I got into Prometrium Australia, and I was surprised to see that not only is there no peanut oil, it's safflower oil or sunflower oil. Sorry, I think I spoke wrong. And no dyes and no titanium dioxide like we have in the US. And in fact, I looked further and Prometrium, the people that own Prometrium own Progestin, which is used in Europe. And none of the other countries have those dyes, have peanut oil, or have titanium dioxide. What a shocker. What's going on here?
Yeah.
So actually a compounded capsule used intravaginally would be safer than introducing those dyes and things. But that happens when you take it orally too. You're introducing some things that you probably would rather not have to be doing it. And unfortunately, that's what's covered by insurance.
Yeah.
Not the compounding, and it's a real shame. And then it's even more outrageous. It's like they're showing like breakfast cereals in the US have 1 million ingredients, and if you go to the UK, it's got just 3 or 4.
Yeah.
It's just
It's completely
shocking.
different. Yeah.
Well,
I,
it's
yeah.
with progesterone too. Shocking.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about the ingredients. I always tell women, read the ingredient list. The inactive ingredients are important too. They're not inactive, they mean something. So that's especially when we're talking about vaginas. I mean, same with a lot of the FDA approved vaginal formulations have a whole bunch of things in them. And I find women are always saying to me when they use them, I've seen this so universally, it burns, it hurts, and this very, very fragile tissue. And then they use a compounded, and it's a completely different ballgame because they're not using all of these, cruddy ingredients, is putting it on this
Mhm.
fragile tissue.
We just recently started making a 400 milligram progesterone suppository, compounded, which is extraordinary.
Wow.
And I love it. I love the idea of this. We
Uh-huh.
tend to recommend more rectal insertion than vaginal with these suppositories. I think they stay in better. I think they're,
Uh-huh.
I mean, if you use one and you're not ready to go to sleep, it works pretty darn well. That quantity is very, very significant, and we do prefer rectal. It's just easier. And then women add transdermal cream on top of it. And we've often had women who think they're not getting enough efficacy after a while with just cream. Try suppositories. And it's really a contradiction in Europe because they have these great products available, but hard to access, hard to get doctors to write prescriptions. I just did a podcast with the doctor in London, Louise Newsom,
Newsom, yeah.
Newsom.
and we were talking about just utter contradictions in the British medical system and how hard they are on women getting access to these great products. Same in Australia, from what I understand. So the products are there, but
Yeah.
getting doctors knowledgeable enough to know what to write is complicated.
Yeah. Is one of the questions was about concentration. She's asking about, does it matter, I guess, when you're using a transdermal, does it matter the concentration surface area? You talked a little bit about maybe Carol, because you were, I know you're kind of nodding. You saw
Yeah.
this, it was really just, in other words, does concentration and size of the skin matter with how you're applying your transdermal formula?
Yes, I have to tell you, I was astonished to find this out, and I can still see the professor in pharmacy school describing rubbing on your skin and using the greatest possible surface area when you're applying things to the skin. So I was quite astonished. Many years later, I had a book that was a compilation of studies. I think they were done in Australia, and they actually used estradiol. I think the dose was 1 milligram, and they had a little size, bigger and bigger. And guess who got the best absorption? The little.
Huh.
Totally contrary to everything I was taught, and probably many of you too. And that does make some sense because there's a concentration gradient that applies here too. So when the dose is all in that small spot, the difference between the two is more than if you spread it out. So that will help the absorption. So there's real studies done to show not a big surface area, a smaller surface area will give you better absorption. And you're not going to hear that from anybody else, I bet.
No.
But
And do you find the location, I mean, what are both of your thoughts about, do we really need to be rotating sites? Sometimes women are like, I don't know which spot, and they get really nervous about the fact that they put it on one spot and they don't know if they did it there yesterday and they're worried it's not going to absorb. How much does that matter?
Not
it doesn't matter. It's the
Yeah.
stratus corneum that matters. The professor with the crinone, he actually studied that. You have to get it through the stratus corneum and then goes into circulation. So the skin surface doesn't matter. You can do it wherever you have skin. And sometimes people don't even like that answer because it's too variable, but they'd rather be told here or there and be very punctilious about how they're doing that. You get a lot of absorption from the hands when you're applying it wherever you put it. So it really doesn't matter that much. Skin that is cold and lacks oils, like in a hypothyroid person, that's going to be a barrier to topical absorption. And I also believe that this high adrenaline state, when you're in sympathetic dominance, your circulation to the skin is going to be impaired because adrenaline will be squeezing those little capillaries.
Mm.
So this might be another contributor to why a cream might be working one time and it doesn't work the other time if you're in a higher stress situation or a lower stress situation.
That's so fascinating, Carol. I hadn't thought about that, but that makes perfect sense.
the same could be said truly of any oral thing you swallow because there are so many mitigating factors.
Mhm.
People go in the health food store and they buy DHEA in a high potency, but most of it is conjugated in the liver. You're not even getting any pure DHEA. Jonathan Wright wrote about this, and other doctors have too in cancer research. You need DHEA transdermally, and the fact that it's oral doesn't make it more assimilable. It's just a different way of using it. And the fact is that with oral progesterone, and because it's measurable in serum, because there's so much enough left over from the slower integration, whereas with skin, a good compounding pharmacy, which most of them are, and they're all state regulated. So if there's a problem, it's that state.
Yeah.
But there haven't been a lot of problems. And some pharmacies are known for making superlative quality, but most of them are pretty good.
Yeah.
And how do you know? You're getting calm. That's how you know. And so, but it's so important to recognize that when you rub that cream into your skin, you're doing something so amazing. It is instantly taken by those enzymes. It grabs the progesterone, literally.
Wow.
There's no time sequence that is significant there. Whatever is absorbable is taken up. 80% of it is converted almost instantly to the neurosteroids. Now, what you also need to recognize is there are places in the biochemical sequences that need the straight progesterone, such as to make cortisol, crucial. So that is one of the functions of a non-converted exogenous progesterone, whether it's transdermal or oral. There's so much misinformation. We introduced this recently too, about cortisol. It's one of the most important molecules for women, and when they're under stress, it's not just that you have cortisol spikes, and that happens when you have low progesterone. It's all being used up to make cortisol, low progesterone, high cortisol. But the chronic low cortisol is much more damaging to women. It just shows a state of chronic stress, chronic emotional debilitation. And, if you're not happy, get out of that relationship. If you're not happy, get out of that job, but don't just stay and suffer.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way. And women are long suffering, and they will. I'm not saying exiting these things is simple. We all know life is complicated, but living with chronic stress is what keeps us in a chronic low cortisol state, and that induces chronic inflammation and the activation of inflammatory markers. There's a huge research drug market right now looking at drugs for inflammation, and estrogen and progesterone are both significant anti-inflammatory agents. And as I said earlier, the key pro-inflammatory markers, interleukin beta, being heavily researched for pharmaceutical use, can be absolutely dampened by hormones, and particularly progesterone. And what is the other one? The mitogen activated kinase receptors are the signaling pathways for inflammation are dampened by significant progesterone use. And these are major inflammatory cytokine storm inducers. And there's so much inflammation today. Why is it worse? I think it's worse since COVID. I hear about it all the time. And I think both the virus and the spike protein in the vaccine, it can be either. But it's not saying do this, don't do this. It's just acknowledging the reality that we each have to live with. And when you have enough autoimmune defense, you're not as vulnerable to the inflammatory responses. But when you induce certain things, whether it's from a virus or from a intervention, inflammation is a major response.
Yeah. It's a good point. So we're at the hour, if you can believe. We have more questions. I don't know. What are you guys thinking with time? Do you want to I'm looking in the chat. There's a bunch of questions. A lot of the questions that we had, we've answered a lot of them because they were similar or we've gone off and talked about things. We can keep going. We can stop. We can pick up later.
I'm happy to keep going a little longer, but
Okay.
we take a short break. I have to take the puppy out.
The puppy out. Yeah.
Puppy's
Yeah.
very difficult today.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah.
I would be happy to
Um,
take 5
I
back.
yeah, I can stay for another hour.
Okay.
So
Well,
if you want to take a
Half
short
hour.
break, Phyllis. Yeah.
Well, half of 40. Well, let's see. I can stay for at least another half hour.
yeah, why don't we do that? We'll call it in a half an hour so that we get, and again, you guys, if people have to jump off, and we'll send out the replay.
Why don't we take a
Um,
5-minute break unless you want to keep talking? I have to take her out.
yeah, I mean, Carol, do you mind if
Yeah,
we start looking at the chat?
Yeah, we can keep going.
Okay, can you
Let's
see
do
the
it.
chat? If you open the chat, I'm just thinking we
Yes.
could kind of go top to bottom a little bit and just so that we're being fair to sort of people putting,
Let's see.
um,
I got to get to the top. There's a
yeah.
lot.
I know there's a lot. And then I'm looking, the Q&A has some too. So we've got a few, but a lot of them are similar. I think that's what I saw on my sheet as well.
Mhm.
So we've got, let's see. Do you find that, okay, so I'm seeing from Lucy, it just says, oh, hi goats, so cute. Does low estrogen in menopausal women mean progesterone doesn't work sufficiently? Do you find that do they need to both be there? So if we give a woman progesterone, she doesn't have enough estrogen over time, is there going to be an issue?
They both have unique qualities,
Yeah.
and probably one of the problems with progesterone is it has so many, but so does estradiol, and that molecule is really important. Even over estriol, estradiol, but not estriol, crosses the blood-brain barrier, for instance. So if you're in cognitive decline, forget about the estriol. You really want the full potency of estradiol. Also, estradiol in bone remodeling it has a lot of effect. Estriol has little. So you really do need to pay attention to some of those symptoms. I love mood things as a real quick good indicator of your progesterone status. For estrogen status, I always ask about what's the state of your vaginal tissue, and is it juicy? Is it lubricated? Is sex pleasurable? So if it's not, whole body estrogen is also low because it's not maintaining that particularly estrogen rich receptor area. So you can use estriol, works better than estradiol in that area. A lot of estrogen beta receptors where estriol really dominates. So it's very, very effective, and you can reverse this pretty quickly. However, in reversing it, you haven't addressed the whole body estrogen that is failing to keep that tissue healthy in the first place. So it's a really good sign that you do need estrogen. I think you need to use both. You want to recover the tissue quickly, do that, and then make sure that you either have estradiol or a blend of estradiol and estriol to
So
carry
Carol,
on.
do you feel like ultimately if systemic levels of estrogen are high enough, let's just say someone has some vaginal atrophy or vulva, issues. Do you feel like that tissue, do you think that some women do need both always? Or do you feel like if the levels systemically are where they need to be, and we're talking estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, right? Because we know testosterone is important for that tissue, or DHEA. Do you feel like they would need both potentially?
I've switched only to estradiol because your body does convert from estradiol to estrone to estriol. So you can leave it to your body's wisdom for that estriol production. However, Dr. Rosens did do a study on a small sample of 3 or 6 women who had gotten estradiol only, and they didn't seem to be converting to estriol very well. So I don't know the long and short of it. Here's again a place where everybody needs to be treated individually rather than a blanket statement.
Yeah, yeah. So Helga's asking essentially that she was on Prometrium for about 7 years, 100 milligrams and 200 milligrams, and struggled with getting less sleep. So she stopped it, and she said her sleep has actually gotten better. Why might that be? Do you
It's
know?
because she made herself more estrogen dominant, which in turn has this tendency to cause some hypoglycemia and put more adrenaline into the things. The low doses are dangerous because of that reason. They intensify the estrogen effect. So she's one who never had the full benefit of progesterone, at least not enough buffer with the estrogen she had. So of
Okay.
course, relieving the progesterone is going to make that situation a little less troublesome. But then she's losing out on all the benefits throughout the body
Yeah.
from a lack of progesterone.
Thanks for that. And actually that just reminded me, for some reason I must have skipped over the question, but I had sent it to you yesterday about, we had a question about, does progesterone does the claim that progesterone makes you more insulin resistant? And I think it's Dr. Ben Bickman. And I think you pulled up the
The exact
quote where he said that, because that was a really good question. I've not seen that before.
Yep. I hadn't seen it before either. And I did a little more AI digging
Mm-hmm.
because in my experience, and it's probably back to John Lee, even remarked that a hypoglycemic situation is helped by progesterone, but it's intensified by unbalanced estrogen. He was saying that a lot. And that's been my experience clinically. Michael Platt wrote about high adrenaline, and he was recommending that you use progesterone at mealtime. And he
Oh,
claimed to have some very heavy overweight men, 300-pound area, just using progesterone at a mealtime to kind of stabilize that insulin glucose swings. So I did not find the work that Dr. Bickman based his statement on. It's a statement and may be true. Also in the AI search, I found that the effect on insulin glucose is not super direct. There's indirect ways that progesterone does that. So maybe this is part of the story. I don't
mm-mm.
know. Extremely good question. Glad to have it.
Yeah, I was really glad too. And I'd forgotten about it until we were just talking about this.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's see. We have here, so we talked about why someone's asking about progesterone working. How do we know it's working? We talked about the fact that symptoms would be relieved. Are you doing, or I guess she's asking about her endometrial stripe. So I think that's part of the other issue too, that women are saying, or providers are saying, that sort of loudness is transdermal progesterone doesn't work, and they're basing it on the serum levels versus maybe looking at an endometrial stripe. Because if we did do that, for most women, if it's the right formulation and the right dose, we would see that stripe being in check, assuming, there's not some other issue going on. Is that correct?
Right,
Yeah.
right. They're using a luteal level
Yeah.
as where they should be using a vaginal ultrasound to check and
Yeah.
see if that dosage form is doing the job for you or not. So it's a misplaced guidance, I think, and not 100% reliable. We're going to run into trouble with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the transvaginal ultrasound is a very important recommendation if there's any cause for concern.
Mhm.
On the other hand, I think most minor symptoms will clear up when hormones are balanced, but not everything.
Mhm.
And most of the time, the correlation of a woman getting enough progesterone till she gets calm correlates with her having enough to protect the endometrium. My traditional medical friends don't like that. It's a little too crunchy for them.
Yeah.
And they want a reductionist way to approach everything. And there simply isn't one. And
Mhm.
for women with significant mood issues, transdermal has been a lifesaver. I mean, we get responses all the time. So what we're finding, and I have found this over 27 years, we've only had 2 cases of women with significant breakthrough bleeding, because almost always, if a woman has an endometrial buildup and she uses enough progesterone to get a shed, then you start over. It's not like having a period monthly. You use it when you need to. If there's breakthrough bleeding, if there's spotting. Now, if that breakthrough bleeding continues, it does need to be checked out by a
Yeah.
competent physician. Most of the time, getting a real shed will clear it up. And the endometrial protection is significant, whether it's transdermal, suppository, or oral, if the woman gets enough. And
Yeah.
we often find women are not getting enough when they're just using oral at night, and they have significant emotional symptoms during the day. So this is not a randomized approach to how to use this. There isn't such a thing out there. It's years of good science, looking at data, looking at the fact that when women get significantly emotionally stabilized, it's the great mood balancer, progesterone. They usually will have a balanced endometrial stripe. They usually will have good gynecology. And we talk about it at grand rounds all the time. How do you know? How do you know? Well, you have to, if you have any significant bleeding, you should get checked out, of course.
Yes.
And a good OBGYN, a good doctor can actually feel in there and
Yeah.
exam and say, hey, this feels great and looks
Yeah.
good, and
Yeah.
tell a lot.
Yeah.
I had a
Yeah.
There's a caveat I'd like to put in here. When you've been progesterone deficient for a long time and not cycling, and you put progesterone in for the first time and you start having lovely amounts of progesterone, all of a sudden you're going to start bleeding. Anything that you've accumulated when
shed.
progesterone has become abundant enough to have its secretory function check in, you can have a bleeding. And if there's a lot of buildup, it could be a big bleed, and you're going to see clots, and you're going to see dark blood and brown blood and all kinds of stuff. And that is wonderful. Unfortunately, if your practitioner hasn't warned you about this, off you go for a full cancer checkup, which you would not need, because it's a normal function of what you just did and should be expected. So people should warn women in advance that this does not mean all of a sudden you have cancer. You're actually getting the benefits of that progesterone and clearing out an accumulated endometrial tissue buildup.
Very good.
Yeah.
And just like we don't want to negate the importance of proper testing when it's indicated, we also don't want to advocate, and I think I speak for many doctors on the grand rounds, we talk about these things all the time. We don't want to advocate, at least most of us, we don't want to advocate unnecessary intervention. And so often, you know, if a woman has a mammogram that shows, you know, if she has a little bit of ductal cell irregularity, it's not cancer, it's stage 0. And then there are certain types of hyperplasia that have nothing to do with really hormones directly. But then the interventions start, and then women are down that rabbit hole, and there's a time and place for intervention. But it's kind of analogous to finding, you know, a stray endothelial cell from a pap smear or something, and then going down that rabbit hole saying we got to do this and we got to, and I think we've been so over tested, and it's so fear inducing for women. There's a wonderful Dr. Carol, do you remember that Dr. Pinto site where she advocates?
No, I don't.
Yeah, she spoke at Grand Rounds a while ago, and she has
What did she say? Yeah.
just saying that the over
testing
is damaging to women, and she's not saying don't test when it's indicated, and neither are we. But the over testing, it's so synonymous with what goes on in medicine today. They got to cover their bases, they got to cover their horses. And so the over testing it's part of paying the mortgage too, right? So whatever.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up.
Dr. Pinto said, you know, she advocates not over testing. I'll keep looking for her info.
Yeah.
But her stuff's good, and she's saying women get told to over test, and it just induces a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And again,
Okay, there was a question here that I saw. I want to make sure we get it addressed.
Yeah.
Somebody was asking about fibroids growing with progesterone.
Mm-hmm.
And I will submit again, I think that's an estrogen dominant symptom that you've induced with not enough progesterone. So you have to be very careful with using plenty of progesterone rather than lower amounts when there's a fibroid. And also iodine needs to be introduced into that situation too. So should be very abundant. And then recently I've been seeing some questions on meningiomas, growths in the brain.
Mm.
And they have estrogen and progesterone receptors. So conventional doctors are warning that progesterone could make that grow. Now, I don't know for sure, but I would consider it very possible that we're in the same situation, that these growths are very dependent on the hormone that causes tissue to grow, estrogens, and is also mediated by progesterone. The progesterone receptors being there should give you a clue that balance is needed here. So this, I didn't know much about it, but it's come up in the grand rounds, and it's come up in a few more places since, which is quite kind of interesting. I'd never heard about it before grand rounds, and now there's more discussion. So that could, albeit a more rare thing, that could be something that will proliferate where there's high estrogen and not
Yeah.
enough progesterone activity.
I'm
I
going to
could see
add
that.
to that because
Yeah.
a traditional medical friend of mine and I just recently talked about it. They are trained to look at meningiomas as being one of the few, and I call it counterintuitive issues where progesterone feeds those generally benign, is my understanding,
Yes.
but they're scary, right?
Yeah.
They're scary to people who have them. And so if you tell a woman, oh, go ahead and take progesterone, that is counter to what doctors hear. And so I'm very careful with discourses like that. I'm not going to say, oh, go ahead, even though it's counterintuitive to me that is how they're taught, because there are some things that are inexplicable in terms of the chemistry that I don't know. I don't know, Carol. I don't know on that. With fibroids, I
Yeah.
generally, if they're caught early enough,
Mm-hmm.
if they're caught early enough before they're too big, generally I've seen a significant number of women have reduction in the size. However, if they're past the point of no return, sometimes that can't be, and their surgery is needed. Removal may be needed.
Yeah.
Fibroids are pretty common. I agree with Carol. I think they probably started long ago.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean,
And perimenopause, or maybe earlier, right? Because I think we have that whole gap where women, it seems like, right, we see a lot of bleeding, we see a lot of issues, fibroids getting worse, progesterone is not addressed, right? Because we
right,
just say, nope, you have to wait till menopause. We know that progesterone's been a missing piece for so many
for so
women
long. And
for
David
so long.
Sweet, the brilliant head of our group,
Yeah.
said I think it was very recently, maybe last week, he said, well, maybe after listening to Carol, he said, maybe progesterone is just the answer to everything.
Yeah.
So at the risk of, being in the role of you give a carpenter a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We're not saying that. It
Yeah.
is an incredibly important molecule. It has been so overlooked. And the reality is a lot of these new doctors are so estrogen centric, or they think they just discussed
Yes.
testosterone. For when we've been using testosterone in our base for years and years and years, estrogen is very important. But without progesterone being the first molecule to be addressed, they're totally missing the point, because estrogen is the first molecule to decline, and it happens starting in our early 30s. It's already
Progesterone.
happened.
Progesterone. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Progesterone is declining for many girls
Yeah.
in their teens, right? But
Yes.
the perimenopause starts in our late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
And then you have this huge fertility industry because young women have been on birth control for so long they can't get pregnant. And then all the young women in their 30s working for big companies, I've learned that they freeze their eggs because the companies pay for it to keep them working.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, we're sort of out of sync with our bodies, aren't we?
Yeah.
yeah, and it's really fascinating how much of this does start with progesterone decline and having good rhythmic cycles. I've always been sort of aghast at pills to stop having a period. It's such a
Yeah.
natural thing.
Well, and maybe can you guys comment because I see something here about sort of, we're kind of talking about, I think there's this idea that you have to meet certain criteria, like you've got to be 45 to use progesterone. Can we comment on, we've got someone here saying, I'm in my 70s with symptoms. Can I use progesterone or hormones? Then we have also the younger girls, like you were talking about. We typically are not ovulating regularly at 13 if we just got our period. So can the younger girls use progesterone if they're having these, what they tend to get, as you know, is here's the pill. You
Yes.
take the pill, we flatline your hormones.
Yes.
No,
Can
if
we
they
talk about
started,
those ages that it's like
yeah,
there's a whole span of people in
I'd love
between?
to say something first on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've had many young girls, mothers bringing them to us. I don't do that now, but we did for years see a lot of teenage girls and boys for mood issues. And my old medical partner, Dr. Wickham, was an amazing internist, as is my current partner, Chris Martinez. I mean, we've seen all kinds of age ranges getting started on hormones. So with young girls, what we used to do, and what I still recommend, is doing 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Go on progesterone for the 2 weeks before you're supposed to cycle, even though a lot of their periods are irregular. It has been the incredible balm for the anxiety issues. And I talk about it in my book. Chapters, I think 2 and 4, really go into the mechanism. So many young girls are out of balance hormonally, and if they're curvy and voluptuous, too young, or just their body type, they desperately need progesterone to balance out that excess estrogen. And if they're straight up and down girls, they probably got too much estrogen early, and their bones got long and thin, and then didn't close on time, let's say. And so their bones tend to be more brittle as they get older. And these emotional patterns that follow each type of girl, the curvy, voluptuous tend to be more dramatic, more emotionally compromised, shall we say. And progesterone helps them hugely. And then, the straight up and down girls, that's more of the mean girl type. If you look at the body types too, I'm not saying every straight up and down girl is a mean girl, but this is certainly something worth observing.
Yeah.
And so these hormones can be extremely useful. We don't advocate starting estrogen too early. We certainly advocate starting progesterone early.
Yeah.
And it can really help alleviate PMS. And it may not, cycles can be off, but so what? We with that age range, we stuck to the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And eventually periods tended to normalize. However, with the older women, we've had many women start hormones older. Now, with estradiol and testosterone, my medical partners have said you treat them like you're turning on a rusty car that hasn't been started for years. You go slow with those molecules because they're not used to them. But with progesterone, we get them going.
Yeah, at any point. I was going to say, I feel like a lot of the women, especially with the Women's Health Initiative, feel like they missed out in their 50s and now they're in their 70s.
They should go
And
for
they're
it.
like, I haven't slept. I think that was the question. I haven't slept since I was 50 and I'm 72. We can do things to help. It's just finding a provider. A lot of providers, they cut it off,
Absolutely.
right?
Even the National Institutes of Health, and it's the incarnation before the current one, which I'm not thrilled with. The study on 10 million women advocated hormones for most women 65 and older. And even though I didn't love every form of the hormones they were advocating, it was a very important overview. 10 million women,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
looking at starting hormones at any age. And it's the most significant thing women can do for cognitive decline. Get started. Get
Yeah.
started.
Okay. Yeah, and on the other end, you covered that beautifully, but the younger end, it's possible to have a low progesterone pregnancy, like just barely maintaining, rather than have the full abundance of progesterone. And what is the state of that baby when it's born? Now you're going to have one that is irritable, colicky. You could give progesterone to that baby. They've been swimming in a sea of progesterone, as I spoke about earlier. And then we have the situation in children with ADD, ADHD, these diagnoses. That indicates that there's a lot of adrenaline going on, and progesterone's a beautiful molecule to bring some balance, bring some calmness. Also, progesterone, as pregnenolone and DHEA and estradiol, they're all neurosteroids and really help the brain work. These anti-inflammatory hormones like pregnenolone, progesterone, really needed in kids. And now, willy-nilly, I see that they are now diagnosing left, right, and center adults, newly diagnosed adults with ADHD. They are progesterone deficient, men and women.
And Carol, maybe you can, that's a good segue because I know we're hitting the 10, for my time, it's 10:30. So we're at that end point. But right before we jumped on, you were talking about working with men and men with progesterone. I don't think men think about it, but can you just touch on that for a minute before we wrap up?
Okay, so the interesting thing is just to compare it to the menstrual cycle, we have follicular levels of progesterone. And unfortunately, we have all these pictures that shows that progesterone is very, very low there. And it's just this big surge of progesterone luteal phase that's significant. Oh no, they have put that line down 1,000 times and it should be way up there. And that follicular level of progesterone probably mainly comes from the adrenal glands, the adrenal production of progesterone. And so that level of adrenal progesterone is what men should be at. They've got all of that. They do have production of progesterone in the testes, and in the testes only. It's a precursor to more testosterone, which is quite interesting. And so not only are women neglected with progesterone, men hugely neglected. So you can measure the serum levels to see if you're meeting that. If you look it up, the lab levels are available and you can test it. But you can also go by the symptoms. They're going to have poor sleep, high anxiety, estrogen as they get to be more and more estrogen dominant. As they're older, they're getting man boobs and lots of body fat, all from excess estrogen relative to progesterone.
Wow. Oh my
There's
gosh. I mean, that's like breakthrough. I feel like we know it's such an important molecule, but that is not talked about. And I think very few providers would understand this, right?
there's another thing. So for young men who are balding and for older men with prostatic hypertrophy, they're given a drug called finasteride, Propecia and Proscar. And if you look back to Phyllis's molecular structures, you're going to see, right, that this is like an altered progesterone molecule, like a progestin. So, and it's full of side effects. They have loss of function. Men have loss of function with this. They become extremely depressed. They become suicidal. So why are we putting in that fake progesterone-like molecule when the real progesterone would be the ticket?
So it's an article I published in Townsend some time back. Reductionist approach in 5-alpha reductase article, and showing the comparison in the molecules, just to give you a glimpse. What I did was I compared the progesterone molecule to the finasteride that Carol mentioned and dutasteroid, which is the other one, Avodart, that are commonly used to prevent benign prostatic hyperplasia and other symptoms. But Dr. Catalona at Northwestern said if men use these drugs and they do get prostate cancer, it's more aggressive. And so what does pharma do? It takes our perfect molecule. This is the mischievous side of pharma, not the good side. His perfect progesterone down here, and then adds these little side chains to make it patentable. Yes. And so when you try to introduce, well, why don't you try real progesterone and you introduce that into a medical conference that's being funded by the makers of those drugs, you're not going to get the applause you deserve.
Yeah.
It's
Gosh, that
very
is
it's
incredible.
complicated, and they're not like they think they're inventing something good. It's like, you know, gabapentin, a widely used pharmaceutical that women are told will help them with a myriad of symptoms,
Yeah.
chronic fatigue and anxiety. But when you look at the actual molecule, there's no GABA there.
Yeah.
No GABA there,
Yeah.
and the mechanism of action is not understood, really, of that drug. It's really a large, I can't say it's fully a placebo effect because women I know have said they feel better using it. I think it's largely a placebo effect with certain drugs, and so it's hard to know. And I found that website for Dr. Pinto. It's DP4, dog pony 4, Peace, Peace, at yahoo.com. I haven't
Okay.
looked at it recently, but we certainly enjoyed listening to her. And
Yeah, I did look at her website too. It's really good.
she's
Okay,
interesting.
I'll put that in the links too
Yeah.
when we post the replay.
I don't know her personally, but I enjoyed
Yeah.
listening. We've had
Yeah.
very interesting people, and let me not forget to remember to mention Dr. Dash's book, Bioidentical Hormones 101. It's not perfect, but it is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's Bioidentical Hormones 101. Everybody who cares about this field should be reading that book. He is a scholarly investigator.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Carol
an
and I,
amazing book. Yeah.
Carol and I
Yeah,
both read.
the first volume covers the two most burning questions people have. One is breast cancer risk, and the other is clotting risk, and he covers it brilliantly. And after you see it all laid out, what's led to the fears and what caused the problems in the first place, it's very well sorted out. So I've been recommending this to a lot of people. When you meet with somebody and trying to coach them, you don't have time enough to give them the basis of the science that they really need to make sure that they're clear in their mind, so they don't have to have fear. You don't have to have fear, and it's well laid out there.
Yeah. I'm
So
gonna
I
link
love
this in
it.
the chat because people are asking bioidentical hormones. It's Bioidentical Hormones 101 by Dr. Jeffrey Dash. I think I'm misspelling
Yes.
it, but it's DACH, you guys, just so that you know,
Yeah.
I'll just put it
Yeah.
to
And
everybody.
if
Yeah.
you read his book, if you read my book, it's really worth going on Amazon and just writing a review because that's how people see me.
Yes. Yeah. And somebody actually linked to your book, Phyllis, here. So that was good.
Even though my book
We,
is not new, it's a cult classic. I mean, women are
yeah, it's great though.
behind it, and my co-author is Becky Bronson, my also biochemist sister, who's a
Yes.
writer. Her novels are great. If you want to read some great novels that are based in science with incredible characters, check out Becky Bronson.
Bronson.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, you guys, we're gonna wrap because we can't keep it to an hour. We never can. We still have like many questions, but hopefully we're chipping away, and a lot of you guys had similar questions. So I just want to thank you both so much for being here. I learned something new. I know everybody else does too, but really, truly, thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Happy
It's
to
so
do it.
valuable.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. The more people that have access to information like you're providing, Jill,
Yeah.
being on top of social media where everybody seems to learn these days,
Yeah.
you can't make good choices if you don't have enough information, and have to. The bigger part of the story is actually not so available. You have to dig a bit, and here
Yeah,
it
you're
is.
making it easier for us though. Like
Yeah.
you're really bringing this. So we'll send out the replay and everybody can share it. And we'll just, we'll stay in contact. And if we need to do another one at some point, we'll do another one, whatever we need to do to try to, well, I'm speaking for, I didn't ask you both, but
We can
it
just,
seems
of
to be a
course.
very popular topic. So I always
Happy
appreciate you
to.
guys, coming. It's so great.
Enjoy love talking about
And
it.
thank to everybody who came. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I hope this was helpful and we will see you next time.
Great.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, guys.